photos, sample use showing the history of the property. Next photo is looking west on Elliott. And we'll turn it over to the applicant. The sound just started flipping out.
Brought some additional visuals as needed. Good evening, my name is Brian. Thank you for the opportunity to present this project. Just want to give you a little bit of a background on the context of why we're here after the fact. It's not how I like to present the project. I know the rules, I know how to do it, and we come before you and ask for permission, not for forgiveness. This is an Open Island Design Review Board. I understand the work that you do, and I respect it, and I respect the procedures. My client wanted to build a pool in his lot, and he went for approvals with the pool company to permit it, and he understood that they were getting all necessary approvals to build this. We subsequently learned that the pool stand that they erected infringes on the zoning setback, and there were some neighbor complaints about that. We went in front of the Board of Zoning Appeals. We got a variance for the height and for the position and location of that equipment stand. We worked very closely with the adjacent neighbors. The trays design that they felt was appropriate. The image right there shows the view from the trays property of the existing pool stand. As you can see, it's quite ugly. You see all the equipment in there, and we recognize that that's quite an eyesore. The design that we proposed instead was to cover it with a screen gable roof. It's screened so that it allows for all the ventilation of the air conditioning equipment, the pool filtration, and all of that that's necessary, the heater. But it creates a visual block from the angles anywhere. At that point, we thought with the BZA approvals, we were done, but then we also subsequently learned that upon completion of the trays property on the adjacent project, there was a limited site corridor of this structure from the street. So the other board shows the street wall, the historic street wall that defines the adjacent lot, and two apertures in it. There's a window and a doorway. And through those two apertures, there is the ever slightest view of the equipment stand. If I could just clarify, other board. That's now looking through the window. And that's the existing as-built equipment stand. And so it is minorly visible, and we do understand that. And that's, I guess, why we're here today, is to kind of present a discussion of how we would like to mitigate some of that concerns and see how much this does infringe on the kind of historic fabric of that existing wall. We like to suggest that it's a minor structure with minor visibility, and it really doesn't have too negative of an impact. Working with the neighbors to try to present something that looks as best as possible. I appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Bryan.
Yeah, I'm going to throw a couple of things in. That's okay. I would also point out that the neighbor's architect who worked on the Trays home is Glenn Keys. He worked very intimately with Babbitt, and the Trays were so impressed with the design that they've actually used it on their own pool equipment stand, which is directly on the other side of the wall from mine and visible through the same corridor that's open. When I started the pool project, I read the two letters that have come in that suggested I knew we did this wrong, and I was just asking for forgiveness. I lived in 100 East Bay before Mount Elliott. I appropriately came to the BAR and asked to change the paint color. I did the same at Mount Elliott. I'm currently redoing 127 King. Even my signs for my law firm and every building in town, I've gone through the BAR, had them appropriately sized. One of the signs, even though we met and had the sign made the exact specs, the board didn't approve of it, we happily cut it down. This is no way intentional. When we put the pool in, I assumed that all the proper zoning and permits had been done by the pool company, which is a very reputable company. I paid a lot of money for the pool. When we got through the zoning appeal and realized that we had to go to the BAR, comments said, no, we never get to the BAR. At the time the Trays were building that house, they had closed all of the windows and doors. You couldn't see it, and no one thought about it because we didn't know what they were going to do with it. I guess that's what the pool company told me. I wasn't living in the house at the time. I was still in East Bay. I just want to get across the board that this was in no way an intentional act, and I understand that we're here for an after effect. same structure they've constructed on the other side. I don't think that it's in any way offensive, and it's gonna look almost identical to the existing roof line of my carriage house. So I would appreciate your grace.
Thank you. Do my fellow board members have any questions of the applicant?
Far above FEMA regs is the pool equipment sitting. All right, I'm trying to decide what's driving that height.
What's driving the height is two factors, and this is kind of what was in part of the conversation with EZA. So one is the kind of acoustical reverberation. So when you have a lot that's encroached upon or enclosed with stone walls, the sounds were generated by all that pool equipment echo. You get this echo chamber. So the idea of elevating it in part is to mitigate some of the sound effects. So that was a big driving force there. The other is the footprint of all of the equipment that's required. And so would it have been done in a different location and then made for a smaller pool? I guess that was certainly possible. When the pool company permitted it, they made it seem like this was all above board and all approvable. I struggle to see what they did wrong in their application, but they clearly did it wrong because it was not zoned. But we asked for the grace of the BZA, and they did give us the variance for that. The big driving force was the acoustics.
One other question: the proposed roof structure. That's not to hide it from visibility from the street, but hide it from the visibility of the neighborhood.
Correct. The visibility from the street was, as Eric was mentioning, something that we didn't recognize at first because the only visibility is through those two apertures in the stone wall. And those were concealed at the time of conceiving this and the first pass of all of this. So the idea initially was to how do we mitigate the concern of the neighbor who's looking down on it, because they were the ones who were most vocal in their complaints. And at the time, no one thought that there was any street visibility. It wasn't until after the drawings were submitted for this review that we realized, oh wait, that must be the viewpoint that's triggering all of this.
And the only affected neighbor spoke in my favor of the zoning bills.
Any other questions? Thank you. Do we have anyone speaking from the public? All right, we have two written public comments submitted. The owner at 7 Elliott Street. These are some of the comments with some modification that I sent to zoning following their approval after the fact of the construction of elevated pool equipment at 9 and 11 Elliott Street. It is bewildering to me that BZAZ zoning will allow non-conforming and non-permitted construction and after the fact and approve it in a hearing with all kinds of misinformation and support without doing its due diligence to investigate the actual circumstances. I will say the purview of this board is design review. We don't have purview over zoning, so I'm not going to read comments that relate to zoning or livability, anything like that. And most of these comments relate to zoning. So we also have a comment from Cindy Walford at 8C Elliott Street. This letter was written in opposition to the proposed elevated enclosure for pool equipment at 9 Elliott Street. The structure abuts a historic and preserved wall and disregards setback regulations. And this comment relates to zoning as well. That takes care of our public comment. Frankie, if you'll give us city staff comments and recommendations, please.
To provide some context for the board, a permit was issued January 25th of last year. And that BAR approved the equipment to be on the grade behind the house. There are no city requirements in safety based on this equipment. Our staff comments, this form reads an addition to the house, and additions should be subordinate and compatible to the existing structure, which we do not think this is, and we are recommending denial.
Thank you, Frankie. Did the applicant want to respond to or clarify anything raised in a public comment or the city staff comments and recommendations?
Sure. I think I just want to reiterate the kind of two-part nature of the application that we're presenting. One half is the location of the stand and the permission. I think we went through the channels with BZA to get the variance for the stand to be built where it is situated. And here we are today trying to work with the board on an appropriate design for it. And so, if this is a preliminary design attempt and we can come back and refine it, we're suggesting that it's only minorly visible from the public right away. And that we consider suggestions for improvements to the design that you see fit to make it more appealing for the neighborhood.
Thank you. Public comment in the applicant's presentation is now closed. We'll move into board discussion and a vote.
I went down and visited the site this morning, and as it exists now, which is the lower level without the top, it is visible from the sidewalk. So admittedly, it's a relatively small view corridor, but it's not just through the openings of the ruin, but it is visible from the sidewalk in its current condition. You can see the top of it and the top of the equipment. So with the addition, I think it would be even more visible. And it does read like an addition. And as an addition, I find that it's incongruous with the architecture of the structure. It does not follow guidelines. So I understand the need for the pool equipment. I'm not sure I understand exactly why it's elevated so high. They could just be lowered a little bit. I think it would solve the problem because then it would not be visible, I think, from the public right away. That's, I find it, I find it quite incongruous with the surrounding architecture.
I too went out there and visited the site, and like Fillmore says, when you stand on the street, it is visible, but you put this roof on it, and it is going to be very visible. And as it is now, you can see a little bit of the equipment peeking above the last member and another row or two, and the equipment itself would be completely screened. But I'm concerned with, I think it's kind of going over the top to go ahead and try to put a hat on this thing. I think it needs some restudy. I don't think it's working. I think it's just sort of an odd situation. I think the best scenario is for the equipment to be lowered, and they wouldn't even need to be here.
So I went by today, and to me it read like any other HVAC type stand. And so the height and to me the visibility wasn't hugely significant. However, as you make it taller, I can understand that. And if the reason for making it taller is only for the neighbors, that's a tough situation to balance the two. I don't have a good answer yet.
So what you're saying is for the sake of accommodating neighbors' views, it's actually going to be more visible and or
I think as perceived from the street, I had to stop and find it and look for it. People just walking by probably aren't going to notice it that much. It's going to read like a or somewhere, and we try to screen them and keep them minimally visible.
I have comments closed, but I have not yet.
If there's a question from a board member. I'm sorry, sir.
Anyway, my view is that it's a challenge to allow such a larger structure if it's only for the benefit of the neighbor. If from a BAR and visibility standpoint, just a little bit of the equipment is sticking up, doesn't seem like as it is, just leave it.
I struggle with this one. I had to really look. I had to look. I couldn't see it. Knowing that it was also done to accommodate the neighbors, which is something that I know when neighbors come before the board, we listen to them, we take into account what they would like to see, and this is tough for me. I'm weighing in favor of approval because of the efforts. Well, because of my view of how visible this is, and the efforts that were undertaken to satisfy the neighbors. I admit it's tough. I mean, I would like to ask, I think it would help if there is some alternate solution, so I'm asking a question.
I completely understand everything that you're saying about the height of it. The trays have been infinitely reasonable. I think there's a solution. If you're more comfortable with the stand at its current height, that I can create a vegetative ceiling that will make them happy. Because they've been really reasonable, and if it's the absolute height, then that's going to get denied. If we're okay with this minimal view, I will go to them and come up with some non-structural solution that will make them happy. Because they built a beautiful home, and I cannot ever imagine how bad this looks from above. I will do something to correct it for them because it's not right. But if the structure itself is okay with you as it sits, I'll find a non-structural solution.
I think, like I said earlier, one or two more rungs of screening up there, and it's like what Laura says, it's gonna look like any HVAC enclosure. It is visible, but you do have to look for it. So I would be comfortable with not adding the roof on and just extending one or two more rows of the screening out, and that will completely cover the units and would not increase the height of it. It's just marginal.
Can I ask another question?
You can ask questions of the applicant at any time.
How much more height are you proposing, just so we can
Sure.
have a gauge in the two photos?
I truly appreciate that, and if I could get one of my other drawings that I didn't print out on the wall, there's a section drawing A300, I believe. There it is. So if I can't video it. So it's 4 more slats, and each side is about 6 inches. So it's 2 additional feet of horizontal slatting is what you're getting. So right here. So this is what's built currently as viewed from his backyard. And what we're proposing is to just extend it by 4 more slats, and then the roof structure would actually be set back, and the angle of the hip roof is that you wouldn't see it. So really all it looks like is extending the screening by 2 more additional feet. And if that's the concern, I agree with Eric's suggestion that we can come up with a different roof screening and not necessarily extend it so high. The only reason why we were extending it the additional 2 feet is because the top of the AC equipment there and the heating equipment actually is above the top of the existing slat wall, so we wanted to at least bring the slat wall to the height so we could then bring the roof structure above it. The roof structure should be invisible with its pitch. So we don't need the extra 2 feet, and I can come up with another solution. I'd be more than happy to go have a shot at that.
What do you think about leaving it as it is?
You look at
I'm fine with, I do think that maybe one more rung of another row of slats would pretty much completely screen the units, and I would be fine with that. I don't think you need the roof structure on it. I'm afraid the roof structure is going to be more visible than what we think it might be.
On this, didn't you ask about floods?
Yes.
Or did you get that answer? I'm sorry.
They were doing for a reverberation of the equipment.
Right, but how far above?
We
Where's
didn't
the
get
FE?
that exactly.
There's no flood driven reason for
So-
elevating it.
So this thing is 9 feet up in the air, the platform.
It's to clear the existing rear
Rear
story
addition,
for the
right.
garage.
Right.
That's one of them, and then the sound reverberation issue is the second one. So.
Right.
to be as accommodating to my neighbors as I can. We had to knock all the parapet off onto Exchange Street for a view line.
There's a very small footprint there, so
There's not much space
Right.
for
by dropping that thing over the roof, you get a lot.
With the sideline, one more slab will do it.
In its current position, it is visible and so, but you can only see, the equipment is almost, with line of sight from the sidewalk, the equipment is almost entirely covered.
There,
One was that.
You have to kind of look for it.
I really, you all have much more trained eyes than I do. But I am the layman, a member of the general public that probably wouldn't see it. Not that that means that you should comply, but I had to really look for it.
So,
I would agree with putting the roof structure on or making it any more obvious. And I'm very much taking into account that this was also done to accommodate neighbors.
so for this conversation is what we're seeing here, inclusive of the little roof structure. Is that? what
That's
we're
how I'm
saying?
gonna get, yeah, so we would,
the design includes the roof structure, and that's what we would have to approve, or we would make a motion.
Defer it and see it seen. That's what I was trying to get to, right.
they defer and provide instruction for what,
Okay.
if we submitted what we would.
Yeah.
Sideline studies would be helpful.
Well, I guess in that line, because there have been plenty of suggestions offered that seem to be viable to board members' minds, so I'll make a motion for deferral or restudy.
All right, we have a motion on the floor for deferral for restudy. Do I have a second?
Second.
Bill's motion to a vote. Bill Turner?
Yay in favor.
Bill Moore?
Yay in favor.
Bill Hewitt?
Yeah, in favor.
Laura?
Yeah, in favor.
Chair vote to the majority and the motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Bill.
very much. Thank you.
Bill Moore, you're recused for this next one. 24 State Street, and I know there's a lot of community members here that are probably going to speak on this one, and I just want to reiterate something I said in the last application. The purview of this board is architecture only, so zoning, setbacks, livability are not within the purview of this board. Keep your comments to architecture. All right, Frankie, if you'll give us an introduction overview of 24 State Street.
24 State Street is a category 3 in the French Quarter. Circa 1841 in the Oldest Historic District. This is an appeal of the staff approval for. This is the property's location on State Street. Some existing site photos.
Doe Cote, 22 State Street.
Oh, ma'am, just give us one more minute, unless Frankie, are you finished?
I was just flipping through, I've got a couple more streets.
I'll let you know as soon as we're ready for you.
This is looking east on Unity Alley. I have a couple of photos for visibility. The 1973 architecture inventory card.
Right.
And the sample maps.
Ready.
Okay. So I purchased this house in 1987 with a perfect understanding that it was a historic Charleston double house with a shared courtyard built by Bill Twinset in 1841. I don't know when the beautifully designed gardens were put in, but it is obvious that it was at least 50 3 years ago. We know this because the plot and survey done in 1970 contains the gardens and trees, the palmetto and magnolia. And a testament to the attractiveness of this open courtyard, tourists are constantly taking photos from the front page. Throughout all of the 36 years that I have lived at 22 State Street, full time, I might add, I've always had a wonderful and continuing friendship with previous owners. There was never a single issue or repair that we didn't deal with together, maturely and harmoniously. I'm afraid this is not always the case with the present owner. Granted, she did ask if I had an objection to her changing overhead light fixture as well as the paint color in the archway. I had no problem with this. Told her so. However, when I heard she was planning to build a wall down the center of the courtyard, this did raise concern. I asked her directly if I could see the plans. She quickly replied, "There are no plans." 2 days later, I left it at that. 2 days later, I went down to the permit office, only to find out that there were plans. And as a matter of fact, they were in the process of being permitted. As Ms. Benito never discussed any type of wall with me, I had no idea what to expect. When I finally saw the proposed plan, I immediately felt like it was a barricade. And I must admit, I was terribly insulted. I want to say that it would greatly impact my quality of life. One that I have enjoyed as a permanent resident for the past 36 years. By losing the beauty of the existing gardens and interfering with the wonderful breeze that we now enjoy, mainly because of the openness and spaciousness as by the well-designed courtyard. Unlike recent owners, I'm here full-time and appreciate this property as nobody can imagine. I pray that you too can see a wall such as this would be a permanent fixture, well, unlike we who are all just passing through this life.
Do my fellow board members have any questions for the applicant? Okay, do we have any public comments? And I'll call on you as, do it just like school, raise hands. And please, everyone, state your name, first and last, and your address.
Thank you, Chairperson, and thank you, Board. My name's Douglas Kirkman. I live 4 Unity Alley, directly adjacent. And I'm here because I saw the sign out front as I passed on State Street. It said there was a view. Any wall, may or may not, but it would seem it may very well abut into my house, which is the wall at the back of the courtyard question here. And so part of me was very curious, back to the point I'm going to keep this to design, is what is the design of the wall? Because I've not seen it shown yet. Nothing was sent through, etc. What I do know is if you go back to the pictures that were shown just at the end that showed the look into the courtyard, and it separately showed the look from Unity Alley into the same back courtyard. But the public has a view of this courtyard, and I can tell you as the person who lives there on Unity Alley and has the tours coming through regularly, that they are looking into this courtyard from Unity, and I see them with regularity on State Street, specifically stopped looking straight in through the courtyard, which I would note that when I saw the 1951 sandboard, very clearly showed that it went into a singular courtyard. I'm not a real estate attorney, and I don't know what the rules around that is, but from a design standpoint, this will very clearly be seen if indeed it's a 6-foot concrete block wall, which was what was described to me again. I would welcome an opportunity once I sit that we get to see these, but I think that that should be taken into consideration from a public viewpoint of what we'll be seeing there. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Stephanie Wilson Gentile, I live at 54 Queen Street, and I'm the president of the French Quarter Neighborhood Association. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on this matter. I respectfully ask that you grant this appeal and defer the application of the wall for the following reasons. BAR's policy statement reflects the desire that the historic character of a property should be retained and preserved. The alteration, and thus the alteration of features, spaces, and spatial relationships that characterize a property such alterations may negatively impact the historic character and should be avoided. We believe that the proposed wall alters and negatively impacts the historic character. In addition, the proposed wall flies in the face of BAR policy that states fences and walls should be appropriately scaled for their context so as to prevent a fortress-like appearance. The proposed wall is a massive structure in a small enclosed brick-lined courtyard and will be highly visible from the alley, as discussed, which is a public right-of-way, as well as from State Street. The proposed view from State Street is awkward in appearance and detracts from the historic character of the entrance into the common courtyard. For these reasons, we ask that you grant the appeal. Thank you.
Good evening, my name is Peggy Malaspina. I live at 20 State Street, so right next to 22 and 24 State Street. I have one question to ask before I make my comments. The photographs that were shown do not include the photographs that I believe Doe submitted to you. For example, they don't show a close-up, a little bit closer. No, these are not her photographs. That shows a closer view into
provided to us. The previous photos were the photos I took yesterday. These are.
Okay, there's one. Okay, I'm sorry if that was up there. I didn't see that. That I think is a closer view into the garden. And then I don't think I saw a picture there. There we go. That is the view from the alley, which is important. You saw a photograph with a car there. It is true that there's from time to time a car there, but the space is rented to a student who's primarily there at night, and I think it was important for our audience to understand that. You have heard from Stephanie, you have heard from Joe. We feel very strongly in our neighborhood about preserving the beauty and the historic character of this property. Not only do tourists stop and look through here, the carriages stop because, there are some stories around the brothel that used to exist there and some amusing points about the sexual icon that is reportedly embedded in the wall, and the thought that all of this is going to be basically obscured with a masonry wall that is 6 feet tall and will run straight into the garden, which will be seen both from State Street and from the alley, is distressing. So I urge you to reject this plan, and perhaps I respect the owner's desire for privacy. Perhaps there is another way to achieve that goal. Thank you very much.
Oh, item two.
My name is Virginia Marshall, and I have the fortunate situation that I'm directly across the street at 25 State Street. So if anybody can see in there from the street, then I can. It's really distressing to me that someone would want to divide such a gorgeous courtyard with a brick wall And from what I've seen, I originally thought that the new owners were doing it for privacy, but then I have since then seen an indication that she's more concerned with safety for her grandchildren and such like that, which I have to say I'm biased. I know Joe, and I know she would be concerned for their safety also. But I think that there is possibly some other kind of alternative instead of a brick wall. If her concern is safety and not privacy, then maybe a fence of some sort would keep the grandkids on their side of the fence of the yard. And it would be less obtrusive. You would be able to just see it right there when you were walking by Unity Alley, which I do every single day. And also, if her concern was privacy, the privacy is like privacy issues in downtown with tourists. They don't care whether they're in your yard or not. So it's a wall too. That's thank you.
Ida Gigler, and I live on 20 Charleston Street. I bought inside the walls in the French Quarter 25 years ago. It was an unspoiled, charming, and unusual mixture of friendly coexistence between owners, renters, and shopkeepers. We all enjoy French Quarter's vistas through gates and down wonderful alleyways. One of those special views is the entrance to 22 State Street. The look from the State Street gate into the long, dark, unusual tunnel-like entrance and courtyard and the bright light is in the large courtyard is such a magic picture. The to alter and compete with that painting would require thoughtful considerations in a solution that retains the unique feel of the French Quarter and not a suburban subdivision of land. Thank you.
Well, you were next.
Kim Bateman, I live at 40 State Street, and I would just say echo to the aesthetic, it's just beauty of the gates and the alleyways and, both from State Street and Unity Alley. I believe both gates lock, so from a safety standpoint, I'm not sure that that's an actual consideration, but I would just like to call that out, that both gates from Unity and State, there are gates that lock and are closed, almost. So I've never seen them open, except for somebody coming in and out. So I just wanted to call that out from a safety issue.
I'm Tim Brennan, 26 State Street, directly adjacent to the property in question. So to point out that all three residents that abut this wall have all spoken out against this. Just from your standpoint, I'd like to point out, obviously, this is clear indication you can see this masonry white stucco is what it's going to be covered with, which is not consistent with the rest of everything around there. I believe it's white stucco that I saw on the plans. And that the other photo that you had peering down the alleyway, if you could pull that back up. Yeah, that one would be fine. No, the one closer up. Plans I see start with the back wall, come to the left of this small tree with an alcove, and the right of this larger tree, with the footer going into the roots of this larger tree. To me, that is clear that the statement that this is not visible from the road is untrue. And also to point out that any care of this wall, even if it's done specifically on the left side property, any care for that wall on the outside would have to be done in Doe's yard. And that is inappropriate, I believe, to put on that person, to put on Doe as well. And to me, in this sense, good wall does not make a good neighbor. I encourage you to support Doe's application.
Thank you.
Kim McAleer, I live at 21 Queen Street. And we moved to French Quarter back in 2012 because of the historical nature of it. French Quarter gets more visitors than any other area of the city. Part of the charm is a place like those property, the sister house, and that garden back there. And to me, that wall is an abomination of that whole garden. And in fact, that tree back there, if you put that wall back there, you're probably gonna kill that tree. And again, I think the issue of the safety has been brought up where there's gates, and actually double gates. So security for the kids shouldn't be an issue. So I would totally reject any modifications to that courtyard. It's a beautiful courtyard, and it's seen by tourists and loved by the neighborhood.
I'm Jenna Hopkins. I live at 141 Church Street, and I've been there since 1987 too, although I have like a year on top of that at another place in the neighborhood. And my house has the first exterior easement given to Historic Charleston was given by my husband. The idea of really controlling what you have here is important. And it's important to preserve and maintain these old homes and courtyards. They are examples of the earliest homes and courtyards in the oldest neighborhood in Charleston. And we're part of it. Doe's house is in the same block that was protected by the Save Charleston organization that was created spontaneously to stop the tearing down of an old warehouse behind and beside her house. Additionally, George Washington danced at McCready's Tavern just a few doors down from her house on Unity Alley. It's the only entrance to the shared courtyard. There's the shared alley that runs through the middle of the house. So to add a 6-foot wall down the middle of this small courtyard would make it so small on both sides. It would compromise the charm, and a new wall will not fit in with the surrounding old wall. The view from the street would look odd, and while a tall wall seems to afford visual privacy, there's no privacy in these little courtyards. And windows look down, you can hear conversations, and occasionally I've had drones fly over my head when I'm gardening. So, anyway, that's all. Would rather not see the new wall. Thank you.
Evening. My name is Doug Sanner. I'm actually an out-of-towner, but I've been coming to Charleston for probably 70 years. I think the beauty of Charleston is really what we're talking about here. I do this sort of work up in Maryland, and I work with preservation people in Annapolis with gardens, formal gardens, private gardens. Read your section 54-325, which is intent. This ordinance is intended to protect trees by regulating the cutting down, damaging, planting, and replacement of trees. Someone has to speak for the trees, so I'm going to do it. As the applicant, provided a tree survey, overlay, site plan which locates all trees be affected by the design and construction of this proposed brick wall and its footings. As this survey been prepared by your guidelines, a licensed architect, surveyor, or engineer registered in South Carolina. More importantly, as a certified arborist, provide a comprehensive analysis of the impact of the root flares of these trees and the methods that are necessary for protecting their health, future growth, and how they will be protected during the construction of this wall. Given that this is a zero sort of lot line and a common lot line This courtyard has been shared by multiple owners of these properties since 1845. Isn't it incumbent on this board to consider a common consensus of agreement and design by both owners in lieu of granting one party unfair gain at the expense of the other? If this board does not consider these questions and grants this permit and an unfair gain to the applicant, then are they also willing to award compensatory consideration to the other owner for having to redesign their space so they can continue to enjoy the quality of life that they and all of the others before them have enjoyed since 1845? Charleston's beauty, charm, and quality of life has been its draws for centuries, and these gardens, both public and private, have been what residents and visitors have been drawn to. To set these precedents as a collective board without these considerations would be a very sad and dangerous course to set. We all have an obligation to be good stewards of our environment and to provide air and light in every corner, wherever it may be. Thank you.
Eric Niederman, and I live at 20 State Street. Peggy Malaspina also lives there. She's already introduced herself. Many of the points that we've been discussing the last few weeks have already been brought up here. We haven't really talked about the particulars of this proposed law. And all I can say is very brief. I don't know. I'm not an architect either. I don't know whether this small space could be configured in a way that separates it along the way, along the lines that they propose. But I can say that we were all taken aback by the crudeness of the proposed law and the apparent lack of consideration for the environment which would be residing.
My name is Jeremy Tate. I live at 37 Southampton Drive. I do represent the owner of 24 State Street. When she approached us about designing the wall, it was really about providing privacy and security and safety for her kids. She has a legal non-conforming ground floor unit that is for law offices, so it's also to provide a privacy space for if those law offices didn't want to have meetings in the courtyard. I do want to thank the owner of 22 State for meeting with me to review the wall and some of the concerns that have been raised here tonight. So we certainly appreciate those concerns. It is a 6-inch garden wall, CMU with stucco on both sides as a brick cap. That was designed really because there's so much brick in the courtyard from the adjoining structures. And it's a mixture of brick. It's a very beautiful brick. So this wall was meant to be kind of material in terms of the stucco and the stucco that you see out front, but that it would be differentiated from all the historic material that is surrounding it. We are in the process, so from the drawings that got submitted to the DAR staff, approval because of the wall from the right of way, not necessarily from this view here or right up against the gate, but certainly from the right of way. We have since developed more understanding of how construction of this wall is going to take place. We went with Mark Abel, Landscape, to come up with how do we actually ensure that this wall mitigates these trees. We'll have an offset footing. That footing, so the flush edge of the stucco will be flush with the footing. The footing will extend back. We'll be 3 inches off the dividing property line. We are in the process of waiting on the survey to be established. So that survey is probably 5 weeks out. That survey is going to give us the topos that we are concerned about the drainage for the neighborhood 22 and neighborhood 24. We did a 3D scan of the site, the entire courtyard, which does give us a little bit of topo information, gives us the exact location and shape of the trees. So that is how we developed the design. The foundation does go, it does come out, it does curve. It is meant to be 3 inches away from the property line. The owner, 24 State, does intend to replace any finishes that get disturbed on the 24 State side during this process. When the wall, just the palm tree that you see in the middle there, it has a raised concrete beam that spans that whole tree where it touches the ground, and it does not impede the root system. We've done this on a number of projects, and it will stick up 3 to 4 inches high to allow water and air to migrate through it. The section that goes around and curves around the magnolia tree, it will have drainage sleeves put into it, and depending on what we encounter, we may actually also elevate part of that foundation to allow those roots to not be impeded. As it approaches to the neighbor, in the alley, your house, sir. We intend to, we don't know exactly where the property line is at present, so when the survey establishes that, we certainly will not go past that property line. If it is 0 to you, not really likely to buy your house. And that is, hopefully that gives some clarity on what we are intending to do here. Thank you for this process. I think this is the right process when there are people that oppose something that staff has approved. Thank you for your time.
Chairwoman Van Slangle and members of the board and city staff, thank you for being here. My name is James Letters. I'm with Jeremy Tate. I'm grateful to live in Charleston, to be a citizen here, to watch what's happening in this place, what's happening. So I thank everybody who participated. I'm not going to be redundant. I'm going to just show you what you can see if you go to the house. It was taken after the placard was put up, so the last week or so. And the question here is about minimal. This is an accurate reflection. This is taken off of a phone, not zooming in, not zooming out. Can you see? We're not standing in it, we're not putting our camera in that tunnel. If you do, you can see it pretty clearly, but if you're standing at the middle of the street, which is where this picture was taken, if I take 1.5 steps to my left, I can't see anything through it. If I take 1.5 steps to my right, I can see nothing through it. But what's minimally visible? What I think is minimally visible, what each of you think, and what everybody here may think might be a little bit different. But you're tasked with it, it's going to be tough, I understand that. But this is it. From the driveway, the same way. There's a little more vegetation here now than one of the photographs that we saw. The vegetation is not supposed to be, included, right? So we all know that. But the bottom line is, when you look through here or here, you're going to look through, and we actually thought the weight of a concrete block wall, a canvas mesh, and a stucco finish was highly compatible with this, because everything was, yet we for sure wanted to show that our wall was involved. We think that that's important. And the third is being conscious of the sun. The sunset, right? And it shows any shadowing that happens from this wall over either Doe's property or Ruth Ann's property. And on the summer solstice, the longest day of the year, there's 4 inches that's 5 feet long that a shadow is cast just to the south side of the wall. Otherwise, Ruth Ann's side is significantly affected, but not Doe's side. And so these are just facts. And the challenge of what's minimally visible is left up to you. Thank you very much.
Anyone else speaking in the public? Okay, we had some written public comments submitted. This is from Woody Rash at 23 State Street. BARS should reverse its approval of a proposed wall to be built dividing 24 and 22 State Street. It's a historical property and building a wall that will be visible from both State and Unity Alley as an unwelcome addition. The public review process was flawed in that area, and that there was no notice to adjoining or neighboring properties, and also wrote on a survey done in 1970 when the two properties were subdivided. It's apparent the BARS reviewer did not visit the property and view the proposed construction from State Street entry. As it would be obvious, the curvilinear wall would clearly be visible as it would be 7 feet high. There has never been a wall dividing the two properties in over 60 years, and allowing one will do nothing to protect the historical value of the building, but will only add a feature that is not a positive addition to the buildings for the French Quarter. Next is Sean McGinnis, 8 Summer Street. I reviewed the drawings carefully, highlighted below are my concerns about the proposed wall construction. When footing excavation and placement will compromise the tree roots. The footing excavation should be entirely on 24 State Street, out of the property line. The existing brick bordered garden will be destroyed in the process of excavating and placing the footing. We also have a comment from Alice Wakefield at 137 Church Street. While an historic space in the French Quarter divided will destroy the essence of history. Next we have Ruth Ann Granito. I apologize if I butchered the name, but this is the property owner, 24 State Street. Dear board members, first of all, I want to apologize for not being at the meeting when the granting of BAR staff approval to construct a minimally visible wall-like property in the backyard at 24 State Street is being appealed. I'll be out of town with my new grandchildren. My grandchildren are also a big reason why I want to build a minimally visible wall on my private property in a non-communal courtyard. Safety is always the forefront of my mind, and because of that, I always unfortunately reflexively assess the physical spaces I am in with that eye. As you are aware, there are 2 townhouses, 24 and 22. Each property owns their own side of the courtyard, with the property deeds clearly demarcating the property line which runs through the center of the ground level access archway from State Street. With an open courtyard, I am unable to ensure that the space where I intend to have my grandchildren frequent in the years to come is safe, while I can ensure that my property is safe with no barrier to neighboring property. I cannot ensure the safety of the other side of the courtyard. It would be inappropriate, nor do I want to interfere with how property that is not mine is maintained. However, if items such as pieces of metal, hanging wires, or equipment that can cause children harm are open, and things that might legally be referenced as unattractive nuisances are nearby, there are things I cannot control. In addition, if the gate to the entrance to the corridor used by 24 and 22 is unlocked and or swung open, there is no security in my backyard for either children or my small dog. Having a minimally visible wall with a separate gate door into my side will provide safety. I look forward to using my courtyard and without my grandchildren, and to even have business meetings in it off the newly constructed law office. And having size does not allow the appropriate placement of the mandated pool equipment needed for the physical size of, oh my gosh. That is not. I apologize, there's no pool. That cannot be done without the minimally visible wall. It is and has been uncomfortable to find various other people, including the unknown, to be using my portion of the yard as if it is communal property. And from a safety and legal standpoint, there is liability to me keeping my side open to others without a notice to them that it is private property. Again, I'm trying to keep comments to architecture only, so give me a moment. Okay, we also, so Jeremy, Mr. Tate, you've spoken, so I won't get your comment. Diana Shank at 18 State Street. Diana Shank at 18 State Street. We have concerns regarding the possibility of a wall between 24 and 22 State Street. The wall will be visible from the sidewalk, which we believe is a violation of BAR principles. Any change to historic property that's visible from the street would have been reviewed by the BAR board, also visible from Unity Alley. Finally, we have a written submission from Historic Charleston Foundation. HCF has reviewed the application for an appeal of the staff decision for a wall between 22 and 24 State Street. The arched alleys between Charleston's historic houses are rare and important to protect. They offer glimpses of Charleston gardens and courtyards and add to the charm and character of our historic district. We have concerns about the appearance of the wall from State Street as seen in the image at the top on page A902 of the drawing packet. From this vantage point, the wall disrupts the symmetry of the combined properties and appears awkward when viewed from the right-of-way. Because the building reads as a single structure, we believe it is important to consider the impact of changes as they relate to both 22 and 24 State Street. We respectfully recommend that approval of the wall is deferred so that the owners of 22 and 24 State Street can work together on a mutually agreeable solution that also complements the character of their properties as a whole. Brings us to the end of our public comment. Frankie, if you'll give us the staff comments and recommendations.
Appeal of a staff decision, staff doesn't actually have comments, we just have some contact information for the board. Originally approved February 21st of this year, and then was revised March 13th. And for the board's information of the points written in the appeal, the plantings and the flooding are not under BAR review, so that is not something that we looked at. And zoning also reviewed and approved the wall's placement and proximity to the tree. They are the ones that review any issues with branch trees. The material size and mass are found to be sympathetic with the existing, and since this was a appeal of the staff decision, all staff can do is recommend affirming that decision.
The applicant, would you like to respond to anything raised in the public comments? And you don't have to speak at all, it's an opportunity. Yeah. Certainly. Could you come to the, it's a matter of the speakers and.
Read about what Ruth Ann was concerned about. Is a stucco wall the final solution for protecting her grandchildren? It seems like if you had a wrought iron gate in the same place, it would solve the safety issue. There was nothing in her comments. It was a privacy issue. As we all know, we don't have privacy because there's balconies and neighbors and all that stuff. So my question about the original approval is, did it have to be a stucco wall or could it be fence? That would help mitigate the damage to the plants and mitigate the damage to the view.
Thank you. Public comment and the applicant's presentation is now closed. We'll move into board discussion and a vote.
Yeah, I can understand an owner's desire to have divide their space off so it's their own private space. I can understand that, but I honestly cannot imagine a more unsympathetic way of doing this. I think this is just a case where the neighbors just need to sit down and work something out. There needs to be some sort of a collaborative effort, solution to come up with between the two owners. The gardens is a very structured garden, so you go in there and you bisect it by a wall, it's going to leave your neighbor's garden kind of useless. I mean, pathways are just dead ends into a wall. As the height of the wall goes, 6 feet is not a tall wall. So we're not talking, people can go up to 7 feet in the historic district. So, and my concern is not as much of visibility from the alleyway, but from State Street, looking down or look down through there, and you see an open space. It opens up to an open space, and now you're going to be looking down there, and you're going to be looking at the corner of a wall. It's going to be very abrupt. So I don't know, maybe, we're only looking at what's visible from the right of way. I mean, if you look at it from that, then how can you treat that space just on the inside of the garden after you pass through that passageway? Can that be some sort of a common area? Then when you go off to one property, then you go off to the other property. But I don't think the solution is a big wall down the middle. I think this needs to be deferred for the applicant and the neighbor to sit down and work something out. And like I said, this is a very unsympathetic way of dividing up the space. That's kind of what I'm going to say.
Yeah, I would say I agree with your points, Bill. Sort of the most extreme solution as far as dividing or compartmentalizing your property to remove the effect to your neighbor. With the retention of light and air is important. Sometimes this board needs to look at things in context. We look mainly at what is physically built and erected and put into a void, but also we need to look at the fact that in some situations, what's not there is important as well. It's the reason we're not big proponents on enclosing piazzas, because the light and the air of the piazzas is important. I think contextually, the light and air of this courtyard is important. Historically, that's what it was. Now, unfortunately, I know we don't take livability issues into question, but it took quite a while. The history of the city is a pretty interesting thing when you research it and you get really deep into it. You start to see how people lived with each other. When you talk to people who grew up here, I've talked to generations now. The way people knew each other, the way people interacted with each other. There's historic context to that. Maybe to your average person going up and down the street, they're unaware of that. But the idea that you can look into a courtyard that's shared by multiple people is something that I think speaks to an area of historic context. And I think that the idea that an alteration of light and air is going on here is problematic for me as well, the visibility of that wall. Now, I do believe in saying that concessions for the person who wants security for their grandchildren and everything. The fact that even this neighbor even offered up what I consider to be pretty viable, potential viable solution in doing it maybe with an open fence or something. So I agree with your suggestion of deferral for the chances for these neighbors to get together, because I believe there may be a mutually amiable solution to everyone here, taking into account what everyone's condition is now and is going to be, contextual to how this property may or may not be divided. So I appreciate, I would say, the appellant's final comment saying that we would be glad to work with the neighbor if we could just have that opportunity. I would hope that the original applicant would say the same thing. So I definitely support the idea of a deferral or potentially a collaborative. And I think the fact that maybe everyone should take back and notice something here, that there are a lot of people here about what people might say is a relatively minor issue. But that's how important these things are to the community that lives here. The board's here to preserve, obviously, for everyone, which would be your casual tourist everywhere up from your lifelong resident. But you know, there's some gray, nasty days out there when there's not a tourist in sight, and the people still live there. You know? So I put a lot of credence in the comments and the passion of the neighbors to this point. So I hope there's a way potentially in deferring this that all parties could get together and come up with something that works for everyone. That's what I would like to see.
In order here, I don't think we could do a deferral. I think the only thing we could do would be to overturn staff's decision, and I'll overturn staff's decision with the comments that it's not, I think we have a good discussion here.
I see, because this is not an after the fact application because staff had approved. I appreciate that.
So, but that's not that.
How do we get to that device? That's the question.
But it's separately from that, I am in agreement. I really, sometimes as stressful as it can be to sit on this board, I really appreciate community members coming out and voicing concerns, and especially when we see long-term residents coming out. And I do think that there is a solution here that would offer, again, we don't think about livability, but I think you raised a good point, Bill, that when I think of livability, I more think of, look, let's not complain about the noise level of pool equipment, but livability is an architectural concept, and the design of these piazzas and these open areas. So I do think there's an architectural question here as to whether putting a wall in that courtyard would destroy it. That being said, I'm not completely against the idea of putting some sort of barrier, and it sounds like the neighbors are open to some sort of solution to provide the privacy and safety to account for those concerns. So I know that Laura hasn't spoken yet, but I would be in favor of overturning the staff's decision to allow the neighbors to work together on a solution so that at the next meeting, if this comes before the board, we have only a few public comments because everyone is in agreement.
I agree with everything that's been said. I do think there's got to be a good solution there that would balance the safety and even privacy and the historic factors that this was a common space. It wasn't meant to be divided. To some extent, when you move into a space like that, you expect to have shared space. But I do think there's a solution there somewhere that would be a good compromise for everyone, and I would like to see that. So.
Can I ask Frankie a question? Do we know any real history on this garden? Like who made? Was it
not Latrobe Briggs?
Somebody, yeah, it's not a Latrobe Briggs garden.
Not that we're aware of.
That's what I was trying to get out.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's not something that staff looked into. And in the case of this appeal, you don't have a recommendation one way or the other. So I think at this point, we're just providing the information of what we have already done to figure out where we go from there.
I think if there was some way to find some of that out, it might be helpful.
I think we have some consensus.
Procedurally, what is then?
It would be a motion to overturn staff's decision. Reverse. Thank you. A motion to reverse staff's decision.
Does that mean that staff's decision is denied, or does that mean staff's decision can essentially be deferred so they can be studied?
I think it'll go back. They would need to resubmit a new plan, and so it would go back through the process over again. Assuming that this remained, because it's minimally visible, that it remained a staff decision. It would come back. So it may very well be back before this board, a different plan.
I think, just to be fair to the neighbors, I would like this to come back to the board.
Great. That's what I do want to make it clear that, again, at least I, and it sounds like other board members are not opposed to a full fence solution, but just something that has a little more buy-in from the neighbors. Bill, did you make?
So I am making a motion to, what's the word?
Reverse.
Reverse the staff decision.
Right, we have a motion on the floor to reverse the staff decision. Do we have a second? The motion to a vote. Laura?
Yeah, in favor.
Bill Hewey?
Yeah.
Bill Kramer?
Yeah, in favor.
Chair votes to the majority and the motion passes unanimously. Thank you, everyone.
See you. Stay.
Take a 10-minute break. We will reconvene at 6:39. And I forgot to grab my water.
So you were healthy. So encouragement.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
Preserve.
Like, I was sitting on a mural at the storefront,
So, my understanding, I apologize for sickling the agent, is that you received more items for our. So, when we had our cabinet meeting a minute after that, we go to the next agenda.
I was curious. And because it's just such a simple, it's just a repeating.
We can't remove anything that hasn't been advertised. We publish on the agenda, we publish the agenda, and then.
I have been, I think for me, on for tomorrow and never heard anything back, so I would love to just clarify what I need to do to get for sure on for May 11th.
What we provided,
apologize.
was that there were four projects. And they had all been gone.
But maybe maybe I did a typo on my part or something, I don't know what happened, I emailed got snubbed.
Who's in the car?
But I
They're over next to the car. Snacks. Next to the car.
Oh, okay, so this. Okay, because I have been told to.
You also emailed the AR email, which looks like.
Oh, yeah.
So it's the same forms that I fill out, so y'all already have all the info. So you don't need it, is that right? So am I on the one? Because I never got the email. So I would love to get that.
Keep going. Just enough to get you back for supper. Just enough to get you back for supper. Yeah. This is helpful. Okay.
So I was in that list.
So you saw my name on there?
Well, I saw your address, but I didn't know that, that's not a problem.
Great. Well, then I'll leave that by 11. Nobody told me May 11th. I got this is my stuff. Yeah.
Well, the way it works is you advertise, and then after the fact,
Good.
You're welcome to
so
it.
they don't get to go on until they no, it would, it's not a year, it has to do with like a new.
So I will not be giving
You will get on,
That's my point.
normally those go out. Then when you for
Okay, great. And so in the on my circumstance that I will get that email, I can show up at 11th and I'll be here.
But he's such a good one. He's the first one we had.
Thank you so much. I don't think I have any other questions. I will see you in a minute.
He's the first part of it.
Images you provide, not visible, not
Just walk.
Have a time.
Just kind of fun, you know.
So. Where you go for so we'll sign off on the permit here.
I had one when I was growing up, and they chewed everything out of they were.
The chance of the days, it's just been short staffed actually. So we should be able to get this.
All night, the whole and I thought it would be a really good. I'm actually wondering like 3 bucks. Normally I am.
So maybe bad start.
It was also weird.
What?
Yeah, I see my next to
Oh.
How is he related to this? I have no idea.
I didn't.
As far as I know, he lives in West
I
End. It'll be fun. Yeah. Very much. I'd like to see him steer. It is.
We actually got something.
See a friend of mine. See him this weekend.
I swear.
None of those other ones are contentious, are they? No, I mean.
All right, agenda item number 9, 81 Columbus Street. Frankie, could you give us an introduction and overview, please?
Okay, 81 Columbus Street is a category 4, the east side, circa 1895 in the Old City District. They're requesting a right angle sign. This is the property's location on the corner of Columbus and Hanover. There's some existing site photos. Architectural inventory card for the property. Context photos, which will be on Hanover. And we can down Columbus. All right, over to the applicant.
Good evening, I'm Michael Renaud with MS 360, the sign company here locally. The application is for a 36-inch by 36-inch right angle blade sign. Hung on the corner of the building. As illustrated in the previous up on the screen. It's 9 square feet total, which is within the allowable size based on the ordinance.
Do the board members have any questions for the applicant?
That's a new support stanchion, is that new, all of that?
Yes, everything pictured on the right side.
Everything's new, okay, thank you.
Do we have any public comment? We'll not read full comments into the record. We have no written public comment. Frankie, if you give us city staff comments and recommendations, please.
Okay, so a little context for this item. Staff denied a proposed 36 inches by 36 inches sign and recommended reducing it to 24 by 24 due to the narrowness of the sidewalk and the proximity of the street. It being a more residential area and signs in that area are smaller due to the narrow sidewalk. Staff's comment was just that we recommended it being reduced to 24 inches and 24 inches. And as we already made that recommendation, we're recommending denial.
Thank you, Frank. Mr. Renaud, did you want to respond to or clarify anything in the staff comments?
Yeah, I'd like to add is that, my understanding of the ordinance is that, you need a maximum of 2/3 of the width of the sidewalk. The sidewalk, from the edge of the foundation to the, edge of the curb, is 77 inches, so when you do the math with 2/3, that comes up to 50.8 inches. So little in.
Public comment and the applicant's presentation is now closed. We'll move into board discussion and a vote.
I tend to agree with staff. A 9 square foot sign for this area, mostly because it's primarily a residential area. I'd probably feel different maybe if it were, say, Meeting Street, but I agree with staff.
Initial look at it before I saw staff comments was also that it just seemed a little big proportionally to where the sidewalk, the width of the sidewalk and everything, and knowing this area, I could drive real fast by and have to see something huge. So.
To a degree, I guess I do have a quick question of staff. So your second comment about residential areas, the signs are smaller due to the narrow sidewalk. So usually you're indicating then the width in context.
And of the approved signs we could find in the area, we were finding 24 by 24 inches.
24 by 24. Question was, would there be any leeway to 24 by 30 or you know what I'm saying, a little bit?
Ours was based purely on they had a square proposal, so we were recommending a narrowness with the same proportion.
But the main concern of size being width is to the sidewalk and width of the sidewalk.
Fellow board members' comments, when I first looked at it, my instinct was that it's a pretty big sign on a very narrow sidewalk. And I understand that it may actually meet the letter of the requirements, but the ARS anyway, using size, this seems inappropriate for the context.
Is this not an appeal?
My understanding was that a staff member verbally gave that information.
So nothing was.
And recommended that if a larger sign was desired, that it could be taken to the board.
Okay.
So that's typically how we present signs.
Right. That's understandable.
And that is correct.
I would like to make a motion. Motion is for denial of the 36, the 3 by 3 foot sign, and the sign should be reduced to 2.
So we have a motion on the floor. Would you say denial as proposed
Yes.
with staff comments?
Yes, that's the sense of it.
Do I have a second to Bill's motion?
Second.
Do a vote. Bill, you?
Yay in favor.
Belmore?
Yeah, in favor.
Laura?
Yay in favor.
Turner?
Yeah, in favor.
Chair votes for the majority and the motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Renaud. Item number 10, 46 Cannon Street has been deferred by staff. We are on agenda item number 11, 117 Broad Street. Frank, you have the chance to give us an introduction overview of the project, please.
Broad Street is a category 3 in Charlestown, circa 1770 in the Old and Historic District. They're requesting conceptual approval for alterations to non-original front stair and to previous rear alterations, including the restoration of Georgian period details. The property's location is at the corner of Broad and Orange Street. Existing site photo. The B3 architectural inventory card. In the context of Broad Street. We'll turn it over to the applicant.
Thank you. Do I need to do the next slide or?
If it's not working for you, I can go through them. Sorry, I
there we go.
checked the clicker for the battery.
I'm Simmons Young, here tonight on behalf of the owners of the house, Nina Rumba and Jan Rosenberg, who are also here. This house has been a boutique hotel called the Governor's Inn, with 12 visitor rooms and parking for 14 cars. We're proposing to change it to a single-family residence, more in keeping with the neighborhood with the original design intention. I'll go through some history, then the existing conditions, and then into the design. On the left is a sketch from 1861. An artist went around and sketched all the homes of the signers for the Declaration of Independence. So we have a very good idea of what the house looked like in its Georgian configuration. And this aided as we work on our design goal, more clearly defining the house evolution. On the upper right, the house is in its Victorian era version. Specifically, take a look at the enclosed space that exists on the current Broad Street porch. Here, and the two enclosures. This was demolished in the 1930s, and that interior space and exterior space has been causing problems ever since then. The next slide is the Sanborn map of 1888 and 1908 and the bird's eye view of 1872. I can draw up questions. The nomination of the Edward Rutledge House for the listing in the National Register shows on the upper right that it was listed for a person, not for architecture, and the city has it as a category 3 house. The next slide, please. On the right, there's an image from 1971 that the National Park Service did as part of their HAB survey. And note that there's no driveway entry from Broad Street. There's another angle that shows that as well later in the slides. Also, here are some images of stair configurations from buildings in and around Charleston of a similar era. Fenwick Hall stair restored by Albert Simmons is on the upper left, and the two on the lower side are from the early ironwork of Charleston, which are the next two houses on the slide, please. The William Gibbs house of 1772 and the John Edward house from a similar date. We're going to particularly take some ideas from how those are configured. The next slide. These 4 slides show the evolution of the house. This is the Georgian era, which is similar to Hayward, Washington, where it's 4 rooms in a central corridor. Go to the next slide. This is the Greek Revival, the first phase of it, where the piazza was added on the east side. Go to the next slide, please. And then the other 2 piazzas were added sometime after 1845. And the next slide. The Victorian phase occurred around 1890, where the wing on the east side of the building, or the left on the image, was added. Next slide just shows all 4 together. So the goal of this project is to more clearly define the evolution of the house. Right now it's a mashed up soup of different eras. That's what we're aiming for. So we'll show a couple of views of the existing house. And we make a quick there's the back of the house, not too visible from the garden. I'll go a little bit from orange. Next slide, please. This is the front entry stair and porch with some of the ironwork that we'll be salvaging on site for reuse. And then the next slide. On the upper right is the Wagner wing or the east wing, and the Victorian detail, particularly on the upper right hand side and on the lower left hand side. That's where we want to try and focus the evolution, explain the evolution of the Victorian period perhaps. Next slide. Really just some sort of bad things that we're going to be cleaning up. Next slide. Protrusion. So underneath the existing Broad Street porch, these are just a lot of photos showing how water's come in and mold and mildew has formed. There's stump pumps under there, obvious drainage fixes that have been attempted over the years. The next slide, I think, shows some of the second image over, some of the current red brick that's been inserted in a place where the original 12 by 12 cypress mud sill was removed. So the whole sill was rotted out with the water intrusion and someone's gone in and had this brick. And on the next to last image there, that's the original arch of the original landing that was outside of the house. So we've got great historic fabric, we've got great images. This is just a really good case for restoration. Next slide. This is the survey, and then I'm going to pass it off to Glenn Gardner, who is the landscape architect.
Thank you. And Frankie, if you would advance one forward, please, and one more. And then I'll go backwards one in a second. I'm Glenn Gardner, I'm the landscape architect for the project at 117 Broad Street. And even though we're early in the process to be talking about the landscape, I'm really here to talk about the site and a few things that we already know we want to do or to make a request to do for the site that will really begin the ball rolling for future planning of the garden and landscape. So on the bottom left of your screen, which is the northwest property, the larger red area that's shown is the existing brick paved driveway entry. And I don't think I'll just point right here. This is the driveway entry threshold. And that's the first thing I'll talk about because we would like to request to move the driveway entry 8 feet over to the west. And there are a couple of reasons for that. One being we have this gigantic historic live oak that continues to grow and remain healthy. And it is buckling and pushing. We want to give that tree a little more room. Secondly, we really also want to capture some more garden and landscape area along the house, which is visible and appreciable from the geography on the house. At the moment, the driveway actually bisects all of that area, and you can lose both there. In green or in blue there's an 8-foot linear piece that is highlighted because the granite coping of the fencing is laid out in 8-foot blocks of solid granite. And as Simmons mentioned in that first photograph from 1971, we know that there was no driveway here at all as recently as 1970. Ironwork and an iron gate. That gate, the driveway gate, was pieced together with portions of the fence that were cut and re-welded together. And there is a solid 8-foot block of granite that we can simply pick up and shift to the east to be able to move our driveway over and do no additional real damage to granite or the iron fencing. And that way we capture more garden space and give the tree some more room. At the same time, based on where the power pole is and where the parking meters are, there's no parking. If we could have approval to consider moving driveway westward, we would then go to the state DOT. That's who would have to approve our adjustment. Thumbs up to adjust. We could now go back then.
Well, you got about 2 minutes.
Okay. We are requesting to return the iron fencing back to the corners of the original structure. That way we open up some landscape area for garden space around the stairs, as we talk about momentarily. Paving wise up front, we have actually located or identified several very large slabs of sandstone in the back of the property that we believe correlate to the landing and the steps that were on the front of the house originally. So we would like to preserve those pieces and try to reuse those in the landscape. As we make our way going up the wrong way of Broad Street, just two quick things to point out. There is a wood gate here that is deteriorated to the point of no return. It's also not the original wood gate. We like to plan to replace that with details that we submitted in the future. And then finally, the masonry wall in front of this 40-inch live oak, 38-inch live oak, is actually buckling out into the sidewalk. So we've consulted with an engineer, we're waiting on the report. We've taken mortar and stucco samples to be prepared to come back at a later date, ask either alterations we need to so that the tree and the wall can live together. And I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you. And I'd like to ask the chair, I could do this in 4 minutes if I could extend slightly.
I'll allow it if we can stick to the 4 minutes.
We can do it. Okay, so the next slide, please. So on the ground floor, not much to talk about. Just cleaning some things up. Next slide, please. First floor, this is the stair adjustment you can see on the north part of the building. And the elevation's easier, so we'll talk about it there. On the second floor plan, looks that. Not too many changes. And then the third floor plan, again, not too many changes. The North Broad Street elevation, next slide, please. This elevation, we're working to restore the original Georgian configuration. So the appearance of the facade will be largely as it was when the Declaration of Independence signer lived here in the 1770s. This makes the primary facade aligned with the primary period of significance. So we're proposing 9/9 windows instead of the existing 1/1 in the Victorian period. We're changing the furniture stair back to the original configuration with a smaller landing, so the house is prominently featured, and correcting the water intrusion problem and restoring the permanently closed window to an operable window on the second floor and the oculus window at the third floor gable. Next slide, please. This is mislabeled as the west elevation. We're matching the triple hung 6-light configuration of the windows indicative of the Greek revival phase on this side. North side. Next slide. South elevation. We are removing the storefront and going with a more compatible window on that enclosed piazza from the 1980s and reconfiguring the stairs, which are minimally visible. And the next slide, please. This is some more cleanup of the east elevation, clearly defining the Greek revival period on the left of the piazzas and differentiating it from the Victorian period evident in the east wing addition. The images on slide 14 show that a little bit better. So looking at the next slide is perspectives, and that's the end. In summary, we're proposing to bring this house back to its original use as a single-family residential instead of a hotel. We're proposing to correct some of the issues that are causing damage to the house, and we're proposing to better define the evolution of the house as 3 principal eras. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Do my fellow board members have any questions for the applicant? You have anything?
I had one.
Yes.
The 1/1s on the Broad Street side, they're replaced with the 9/9s. Do you know about what those windows date to?
We think they're 1890, that's when that Victorian period was.
Thank you.
All right, do we have anyone speaking from the public?
My name is Mike Laughlin. I live
at 14 Orange Street. Orange Street, as many of you know, was first built in the 1730s, which actually predates the house that we're talking about. And I'm here to speak specifically about one aspect of the proposal. I would have to say in general that the architect and the landscape architect have been very generous about sharing details of their plans, and most of which residents of Orange Street support. Certainly the preservation and restoration of its original content. We do have concerns about one segment of the presentation, and I'm going to speak briefly about it just because I've already submitted written comments. I'm just going to focus on one part of it, and another colleague will address it more. If you go to the drawings, and I'm going to just hold it up, maybe you can pull it up. It's this one here. Site plan, that one. I believe it was Simmons that mentioned when one of the photos earlier in the presentation that there was no driveway from Broad Street. And that's because the access to this property came primarily from the rear adjoining properties. Over time, that has been subdivided into 3 lots. And what are concerned about, this presentation is focused on the driveway itself. Currently, that's a shared driveway that if you turn to the next page, existing site plan extends all the way to the carriage house, or kitchen house, I should say. And the proposal replaces the oyster shell portions, tabby driveway with an attractive brick driveway, but only provides access to the main house and essentially seals off and landlocks the adjacent property. So our concern is the preservation of the early 18th century wall on the eastern line of that property, the Orange Street side of that property. Currently it has that gate opening that Mr. Young referred to that's going to be restored, and we want to preserve that wall as is because of its historic significance. So our request is that the drawings be revised to show access to the adjacent kitchen house as it was before and has been since the original Broad Street gate was put in. Any questions?
My name is Henry Grimble. My wife is Virginia, and I live at 11 Orange Street. I was born and raised in Charleston. We've lived at 11 Orange since 1981. As a child, Simmons Young's great uncle, Connor, rented half of 117 when it was a nunnery on the other half, and I played in that house. That wall was there when I was a kid. The first thing I want to say, and I'm concerned about this, this advertisement for the meeting here tonight was posted, and I've got copies of it. And I want a copy of that to put in the file as a record. It was posted and says, public hearing, all request alterations to front stairs, rear fenestration. And I walked to work, I walked by there and I looked at it and I said, you know, they do nice things to this house, restoring the alteration stairs and rear fenestration, rear fenestration. I walked by there and I said, what is a fenestration? I learned a long time ago in jury trial, never use language like that in front of a jury. So I had to look it up. I didn't know what fenestration was. It's windows. It's windows. The notice requirement for this board is in Article 2, Meetings, Section 5, Public Notice, and it says in part, the property that is the subject of the application shall be posted with a sign at least 5 days prior to the meeting. The sign shall contain a description of the matter to be heard and specify the appropriate city department to contact, etc. That notice that I saw misled me to the point where I was not going to attend until Mike Laughlin came down here and actually looked at the agenda and said, this thing is changing. That's not right. Nobody should run a business that way. Courts don't run that way. Fair notice is an entitlement to the public, and we didn't get it. Now, subject to that objection, which I think would reverse any decision you made at a night, it goes beyond those two things. Subject to that, if you look at this diagram here, and as long as I've lived there, that there's been a driveway, and it services this place in the back. This is 17 here, 17 orange. I didn't even know it was a separate line. And this is 117. And 17 and 117 have been joined at the hip for as long as I remember. And so, you know, early on, we had a sip and see that the applicant organized, and the plan was to come down in here and have a driveway that went across. That plan's been changed, and I'll tell you why. Because Mike went up to Jan and said, are you gonna want to break a hole in that wall? That historic wall has been there a couple hundred years, and he had to admit, yes, he did. He was putting a driveway right to it. And he didn't show it on the plan. Mike just happened to ask him, and he said that, and I told him Mr. Ruthberg at that time, I said, I'm going to oppose you. I'm breaking that wall. So he writes to Mike, Mr. Ruthberg, email of March 22, you obviously not happy to sit and see with our plans to make a driveway and opening towards Orange Street. First of all, we have no intention to use it as an entry. It would not make sense to drive around the block just for that. He goes on to say, without an exit on Orange Street, it would mean backing out onto Broad Street. Well, that's absurd, because there's plenty of room to turn around and come out straight on the Orange Street. He goes on to say, we have asked Simmons and Glenn to study what would be needed to make the turn to cause park straight across on Orange Street and adjust the plan. So this really is headed towards changing this backyard here. If you look at the plan right before this, the new plan, it's the block this kitchen house from having a pipe stand driveway. And I said, he emailed, he mentioned my name and then said, I don't know what Grimble wants. And I emailed him back, and I want to make these emails part of this record. I said, there are two things about it. One, that wall is historic. I only want to do a 20-foot break in the wall for a car, of all things. And second, he said he's only going to use it as an exit. Who's going to say 10 or 15 years from now, a new owner doesn't change it? Who's going to say that? Who's going to restrict it? No one. And he says it would be safer, but if you come out of Orange on the Broad right here, you're that much closer to the light at King and Orange. And the congestion comes down here, and it's easier to get out to there. And I said that in my response to him in this email and got no response back. I said, that's not right. So we are concerned about where this is headed. This new plan, if you go back one slide, ma'am, can you put it back one slide?
Yes, sir.
This new plan, you can see he's effectively eliminating a pipe stem lot with common driveway with this new plan. And that means he's going to come back. I promise he's going to come back to you and say, I want to break in that wall because I'm going to build a house back here. About that, we're going to need to exit on Orange Street. And that's what that's all about. We applaud the changes he wants to make in the main house. at 117. But this sip and see we had was not exactly what I call transparent. And so we have real concerns about what he's asking here tonight. He's gone beyond the front stairway and the fenestrations and moving the driveway 8 feet to the west, returning iron fencing, working on the masonry wall. It's on Orange Street. It's been there. If you look at some of these slides that we went through, Mr. Young showed a Sanborn map. The wall was on it. He showed a Victorian era photo. The wall was on it. And that driveway has been there as long as I've ever known. So we have real issues, not with what they want to do with the house, not the stairs, not the windows, which is what's supposed to be before you tonight, but with these other changes that they're going to propose that are going to really alter things significantly for Orange Street residents. If it had been properly advertised and there was this issue about breaking through the wall, which is what we're really headed to, the wall on Orange Street, you'd have a crowd of people in there because the neighbors don't want that. Orange Street is small, it's the only street in the city where we can actually park the right side of our cars up on the sidewalk, because you can't get down it otherwise. And the parking is extremely limited. And there'd be a sea change if you break down 20 feet of that wall and make that an entrance exit. So, one, I really object to a consideration of anything other than what was legally noticed to the public. Again, I wouldn't be here if Mike had come down and looked at the agenda and said, there's more to it than that on the agenda. That's not right. It wouldn't stand a prayer in a court of law, not a prayer. And second, you give him what he wants in these plans, and the next shoe to fall is going to be that break in the wall, which we're going to adamantly oppose. And he knows that I made it clear to him on the sip and see when he admitted that that's what he really wanted to do. And that's why what I suggested in my email response to him, that use it as a pipe stem lot with a common driveway, that this plan totally changed. This was not the plan he showed us a couple of months ago on the Sipping Street at all, because they got to get rid of a pipe stem lot. And if they do that, then they're going to say we've got to have an opening on Orange Street. We object to that. I'd like to make a copy of this set of emails part of the file, if you don't mind.
Mr. Brennan, do you have anyone else speaking from the public?
I'm Carol with the Preservation Society of Charleston. Just wanted to quickly say that the Preservation Society really appreciates the applicant reaching out to us on this project, as well as the thorough study that has gone into understanding this building's evolution over time. Based on the documentation provided on the main house, we are supportive of the restorative measures proposed to the significant work plan.
And Mr. Laughlin and Mr. Grimwood, your comments are in the record, but I won't read them since you have the opportunity to speak. And we have one final written comment from the Charleston Foundation. HDF has reviewed the application for conceptual approval for alterations to 1 to 17 Broad Street, and we are in support of the proposed changes. The applicant has carefully studied the evolution of the building. The proposed changes are appropriately respectful of each period. The building, as it currently stands, exhibits a random mixture of partially deconstructed Victorian modifications. Rather than showing the evolution of the building over time, these modifications obscure and confuse the original architecture and do not contribute to the character of the building. The proposed changes will improve the legibility of the various periods of architecture of the property and reestablish the important Georgian features that should be preserved. This approach is especially important at this site because this is the former residence of Edward Rutledge, the youngest delegate to sign the Declaration of Independence. We respect the application for 117 Broad Street. Okay, and that is all of our public comment. Frankie, if you give us these staff comments and recommendations, please.
Do I go after that?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, thank you.
believes the proposal is appropriate to the structure and appreciate the restoration of original features and sympathetic treatment of the rear alterations. Therefore, staff recommendation was conceptual approval with a final review by staff.
Thank you, Frankie. Okay, now Simmons and Glenn, did you want to respond to or clarify anything raised in the public comment and city staff comments and recommendations?
I'll just make one comment, which is that there are no easements on 117 Broad, and we think that the focus that everyone's talked about from staff and Preservation Society, Historic Charleston, is the accurate reflection of what the application is about.
I'll be very brief and say that I think what we're showing you today is 100% truthful as to what our request is for 117 Broad Street. There are multiple properties here. In the future, you may see some for another property, but today we're looking at 117 Broad Street, which is its own freestanding.
Comment, the applicant's presentation is now closed. We'll move into board discussion and a vote. And you did answer a question of mine, whether there were any easements. Sounds like there's not.
The tail search not.
You probably should address it in this question. Does anyone have well, I'll make a motion to enter into executive session. Speak to city attorney about the notice issue. Do I have a second? All in favor? Aye. Great. We'll be back shortly.
How did it matter? You did show it back. Actually,
It doesn't matter.
Yeah, no, what you said is for sure, like, you did show that. And you commented on it. So.
I'll tell you what, you calling me up.
Well, you were saying that I'm dead within the next 5 years. That wasn't very nice either.
No, I didn't know what's gonna happen when you're gone.
That's what he indicated, either.
We might all be dead in 5 years. Don't take it personally, it's just
I
not a
do.
life and death.
Things like that, I do take personal. Okay.
I take it personally.
Yeah, good, so. Definitely, that's not right. I mean, she doesn't exist in this whole thing. He's only talking about he and him. We're both together in this house. I think there's some, the original consistency plan did not show the bridge, but it did. The subsequent one that we looked at. That's when I looked correctly at the consistency, because it did, she wasn't in that.
It's not in there.
Because I went to ask Glenn, where's this driveway? He said, the Horn Street. I said, well, how's it getting out?
And I stood right there and heard it. You must be there.
Yeah, I wanted to do it. And also, you know,
Previous one?
said that. Yeah, so the seller.
I didn't know that.
I raised that. Last August.
You got a copy of the list? I'd love to see it. I've never seen it. See, that's what the sip and see was all about. Just to get us Small project, but nothing that for it. This is all just yeah, it'll it should make the money for the work players. Yeah. That's what I was gonna say. We can implement it if we wouldn't want to, but it's not. It's a piece of yeah. You look around. And the patio is already there. Those are all. The only thing that I did I got to be fully reinforced able. It's not a good. They won't this is what you'd be able to see one back on the road. I have other, that's why you probably can barely see it because it's standing on the street. And if you compare, so no, it might be the thing. Yeah. Exactly. So true.
Without markers.
But very monster. Way back. Received on the side of it. You were actually drafted. And nothing is from that. That's done. That's what stops on here. You stop it. And then that would be. What it is that said, it's a solid. No. You knew when you lived there. There was no sign of the bachelor.
Oh my gosh, she is living.
You know what she did? She was.
Oh, Jacob.
They were that old in the house. What's her thing? Yeah, value.
That's good.
I was against it for sure. Not.
Don't you just think,
All that, but anyway, what's really going on? Structure case.
Well, I guess that's one thing.
And for
People to drive smaller cars, but.
Great.
Do you think that in Charleston, just with the tech streets?
There was a portrait of the land was huge up down.
Yeah, I know.
The portrait of the
Yeah.
and listen, there's no value, well, it's so hell it out for our we still live in and we would have lived there. Place, great, they said, this was trying to screw everybody two ways.
Yeah.
But I was right there. Well, I'm an asshole, but I don't think you feel it.
And of course, it looks nice, but you can't appreciate it.
It depends. I didn't mind it. Absolutely. I think that there's a lot of interest in what's going on.
Yeah, no, your mom was right there too. Yeah, that's what I was also.
All right, questions of Mrs. Merriman, do we have a motion to exit executive session? Executive session, yeah, executive session. And, second,
Second.
favor? Okay, we are now back in regular session. No action was taken during executive session. After reviewing the applicable code section that applies to VAR notice, it's the position of the board that proper notice was provided. And so therefore, we are going to consider the full application as submitted. So at this point, we are now back in board discussion and vote. That's good.
Well, I guess I can start out with architecture. I'm very appreciative of the research that the applicant and the applicant's architect has done. The evolution of the house, the investigation in the structure, finding evidence of some remnants left, things that are going to be reused. Appreciate the fact that the proposal is to, albeit clean up a lot of things that have been done, but it's also to leave indications of some of the evolution of what's happened to the home. So I find what's going on architecturally to be a very positive property and for the home. Support of an approval. Regarding the site, which seems to be maybe an issue that has some other things that, other conversations that are either ongoing or will be ongoing. I readily agree with application that I'm seeing that the driveway is recent than 1971, the date of that photograph. And I do appreciate the description of potential relocation of that driveway on Broad Street by simply taking a component that's in an 8-foot module and shifting it over. That would be the most sympathetic way to do that work. So conceptually, I do agree with that concept as well.
Just echo everything you said about energy.
Same here. I agree with everything. Well, I said in sort of my first indication is that had a little bit of concern about the replacement of the 1890s 101s with the 909 Georges, because that demonstrates evolution of the house, which is now historic. It's not that I don't really like Georgian architecture, but I really do. But I just have to think about the fact that that does demonstrate the evolution of the building, which is now historic. However, those the 2/2 are being maintained in the part of the building. So I think, and the replacement of the windows on the front facade, the 2/2s, are replaced original Georgian windows. So absolutely, that piece that is well. So I think that's okay. I think everything else that's going on in the house is sensitive and appropriate. So I certainly support it. I think the landscape plan and this early evolution here is certainly a nice plan. I don't see anything particularly wrong with it. And as Bill said, I think the treatment of relocating the gate on the Broad Street side is sensitive, very sensitive. I appreciate that. The back lot is a separate lot, and there is nothing in this submittal that pertains to that back lot. And so we, I think, should focus on what is being submitted. It would be inappropriate for us to focus on something speculative that might occur in the future on a separate lot. So with staff's approach.
Or more, did you want to craft a motion?
Final review by staff.
All right, we have a motion on the floor for conceptual approval with final review by staff. Do I have a second? Bill? We'll move into a vote. Bill Buick?
Yay, favor.
Laura? Yay in favor. Elmore?
Yay in favor.
Bill Turner?
Yay in favor.
Chair votes majority, and the motion passes unanimously. Okay, agenda item number 12 is school. We have a little alien in here.
Had issues with the sound. He came down and got it going, and we'll don't have the standing mic, so it shouldn't be getting into it.
Agenda item number 12 is 80 Alexander Street. Frankie, when you are ready, if you'll give us an introduction overview.
Okay, 80 Alexander Street is a category 2 in the Zeke Borough Historic 1850 in the Old and Historic District. They're requesting conceptual approval to restore piazza, glazed windows, extra front steps, construct brick wall, replace piazza door, alterations to crawl space door, and hardscape alterations. This is the property's location on Alexander Street. Take photos. The 1973 architectural inventory card. And over to the applicant.
Hi, I'm John Johansson, I'm here in Video on Xander Street. There are a number of items that I've requested a review of, and I don't know if you'd like me to give you a quick synopsis or if it's self-evident material that we have. To save time, I'll look at discretion.
Do you mind if the board members have any questions for the applicant? Do we have any public comment?
Andy Catherine here with Preservation Society of Charleston. We've had the opportunity to review this application, and overall this appears to be a very positive preservation project. That submittal requirements were met, and what is before you, we really felt more information is needed to evaluate this request, specifically to produce a comprehensive plan, clearly outline the scope of work. But we are supportive of the nature of the project that is being proposed.
Are any other members of the public speaking? All right. Written public comment. Frankie, will you give us any staff comments and recommendations?
Okay, so just provide a little information for some of the items submitted. The proposed HVAC and water heater are not visible from the public right of way. Neither is the proposed wall at the rear of the structure. The window repairs are to be in kind to match existing, so are the repairs to the trim. Staff comments, staff suggests adding a nosing detail or some other detailing to the steps to be more in line with the rest of the street. That would be the steps at the front piazza screen steps. The proposed door matches an existing door on the piazza, though we request the applicant to confirm that its size fits in the piazza screen without alterations. Provided site plan should locate the house, driveway, columns, property wall, and confirm the width of the gate matches the width of the driveway. That site plan I'm referring specifically to the driveway hardscaping. All space door illustration needs some additional detail added. At an angle, it's a little bit difficult to understand. Staff, however, is recommending a conceptual approval with staff comment and a final review by staff. And if the board is willing, we're happy to work with the applicant on whatever details.
Thank you, Frankie. Mr. Johansson, did you want to respond to or clarify anything raised in the public comment or the city staff comments and recommendations?
A little shocked that everybody panics said stick figure drawings in the house. No, they aren't the best, but I do think they accurately portray what trying to do.
All right, public comment in the applicant's presentation is now closed. We'll move into board discussion and a vote.
I agree that I don't think the current submittal is that's what's being proposed. There are a list of repairs which I think can easily be handled, just as a description. But things like detailing of walls, steps, the driveway, we need details on all those sorts of things, and we need a proper site plan, dimension site plan.
That I think this seems to me this really doesn't meet submittal requirements. I appreciate what's here, and I appreciate the concept of doing this, and I appreciate the sort of photographic window survey, but the notes just say reglaze the windows. My instinct is there's a lot more work there to be done once you get into reglazing those windows, and it's a category 2 house. I think we would have to require more detailed information as to how this was going to be handled. Just assuming if you were going to start replacing sash that were might be too deteriorated to repair, and this just feel like there's really not quite enough information here at a house of this level.
Is it something that you would be comfortable letting staff determine the details, and then staff would have the option to elevate it to the board? And this is far beyond my expertise, so. If a board member has a question for the applicant?
I'm just gonna state what I was thinking is along the lines of what you're discussing right now. That I thought it might be applicable at staff's discretion to determine which items were more specifically repair in nature. Items obviously could be sort of whittled off the list. But I do believe that we had a couple of definitely straight up legitimate points about some detailing that really should be present in a submittal package and potentially as a comprehensive site plan as well. So there are proportions of this that definitely could be reviewed at a staff level. Someone has to be arbiter of what that is. So I would assume staff could say, okay, we fair in nature, not requiring the level of detail. However, I think the board has now raised a point that there are some items that the board feels more thorough drawings.
Would we treat this, I don't know if it might have been the last meeting where we ended up either deferring or giving, I don't remember what we did, but we essentially said staff can make the decision and come back before the board. Staff could guide the process.
Right, and so staff determined, yes, okay, this item, that item, that item do need to have further detailing and do need to go back to the board. And just one of the list, right? Is that what we're saying?
I think so.
Okay.
Was that last meeting? There were two applications I think we did that with, and we might have structured it as a denial, but it was a denial and a resubmission for staff. That's what
Yes, well, the items that appear to be more of repair nature here are very positive, so I wouldn't attach a denial to this application right now. I would more talk about a deferral.
And then Frankie wants to whittle off some of the very simple things that she doesn't think need.
Could even be if there was an intermediate staff visit, for example, like Fillmore mentioned windows, might be able to do, an on-site just review of the windows and see if there was a more comprehensive specification, reviews or details that might be warranted, items like that at your discretion. So I would defer to give staff time to make those determinations and then guide the applicant into the correct form of application if need be, to come back to the board.
I agree with that. We did structure it as a denial, but I remember reading that before the meeting and thinking that was correct. So
Normally when we look at work on a category 1 or 2 house, we have a set of drawings, and the drawings have more detailed notes. They explain, that repairs to windows are going to be made in kind, or replacements are going to be in kind. And when we approve submittal, even these drawings, we're approving a set of drawings. Do not feel that the drawings have enough information to sort of give you real comfort in approving a set of drawings as opposed to, and I think the concept is great. I have no problem with what's going on. I just think that when we approve this, we are approving what's on those drawings, and what's on those drawings is
So I'll go ahead and make a motion for deferral with a board comment that staff charged with, because it's what staff always does anyway, but staff qualify the particular items of submittal to determine which items may require supplemental drawings or detailing return to this board, and which items may be not subject to that review, simply approved at a staff level. That makes sense. It's staff's discretion.
Deferral with the board comment, that resubmission is to staff for staff to determine which items require board review.
Further detailing.
Require further detailing of board review.
Yeah, and what those details might be. Drawings, let's say, submittal detailing and drawings might be.
Do I have a second to Bill's motion? Put the motion to a vote. Bill Turner?
I in favor.
Bill Moore?
Right.
Bill Lee?
Yeah, in favor.
Laura? In favor. Chair votes the majority and the motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Johansson. Agenda item number 13 is 76 Queen Street. Frank, you can give us an introduction and overview, please.
Okay, 76 Queen is a category 3 in Charleston Village, circa 1893 in the Older Historic District, requesting conceptual approval to construct aluminum pergola. Say photos. 1973 architectural inventory. And we'll turn it over to the applicant.
My name is Tyler McKay. I'm a project manager for Shrek Care Outdoor. We're requesting permission to build an aluminum pergola at Husk in the back patio area. This was left out of the submittal. It shows a rendering with a street view, so you can see what people would see from Queen Street if you'd like.
We're going to put it on some of the other renderings.
Yeah, the other renderings show what it would look like from the back of Husk. So I just wanted to let y'all see what it would look like if you were standing on the north side of Queen Street from looking down Valley. It's not very visible from the street, and it can be removed if needed. So, any questions?
Any questions from my fellow board members?
It's in your aerial shot, drawing it, and then you have a rendering, which is on the aerial shot. That one. Is the change in the landscape in your, this proposal, or is it just off?
Just the pergola. The patio is already existing, so we're not doing anything.
You're not doing anything. It's just that the two are different. The two, you know, the photograph and the rendering. So I just wanted to make sure I understood everything.
Yes, sir.
How is this structure anchored?
With concrete wedge anchors, half-inch concrete wedge anchors.
Do you have, so you mentioned there was no alteration to the landscaping, paving?
So according to the owner, they said that there's a slab underneath, which we would obviously make sure that that was there. Right now, yeah, the patio is already existing, so we don't need to add any concrete. We just wedge anchor into that.
It's a little shut out. Look, it's just concrete now. I kind of showed the paving in the other, and I didn't know if we were approving a change in the paving or not. And I think it is sitting on the concrete, so it's fine.
Any questions? Any public comment? no written public. Frankie, give us any staff comments and recommendations, please.
Some context, structural will be minimally visible between 74 and 76 Queen. And we think that the proposed differentiated from the existing. We are recommending conceptual approval with a final review by staff.
Thank you, Frankie. Mr. McKay, did you want to respond to or clarify anything?
No.
Public comment in the applicant's presentation is now closed. We'll move into board discussion and vote.
Yeah, that's a good question, Frankie. There are a bunch of details already in here. Are there other final review details that you're looking for?
No, ma'am. We just have to sign off on the permit anyway, so that's
So that's kind of when it just comes later once they get the permit. Is there?
So what we have been recommending is doing a final review within the permit, so that we're not doing a final review and then comparing those documents to the permit later.
Okay.
So since we have to sign off on the permit anyway, it's become reflex to say in final review.
It's gonna happen anyway. Yeah, okay, I understand.
But we are not opposed to a higher level of approval.
Guess I should have asked this earlier. Yeah, it's just one more. Is there a lighting going on under this?
There's recessed LED lights and 2 beams.
This will be a lit space.
Yes, sir.
JJ, your thoughts, staff, finance, and
No, you're in here.
Yeah.
On the beams.
It's different and it's functional and.
It's pretty simple and reversible. And so
It is kind of neat back there. You've got some historic structures. Something a little.
I have that, constant.
Is it like a trash area?
No, they're seating right now, but I think they're trying to revamp it a little bit.
I have no problem.
A motion for conceptual approval with final review by staff.
All right, we have a motion on the floor for conceptual approval with final review by staff. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
All right, motion to vote. Bill Huey,
Yeah, clear.
Bill Turner,
Yea in favor?
Fillmore,
Yea in favor.
Laura.
Yay in favor.
Vote to the majority and the motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, agenda item number 1495 Ashley Avenue. Frankie, could you give us an introduction and overview of the project, please?
Ashley is a category 3 in village circa 1845 in the Oldham Historic District. They're requesting replacement simulated divided light windows. This is the property's location on the corner of Montague and Ashley. Some existing site photos. Inventory card. Over to the applicant.
It's good to be here last. I'm Andy Bjork, 95 Ashley Ave. Medieval windows on the 4th floor and they're failing. They're replacement windows sometime put in around 1990s. I want to replace them. The product they're going to propose is a simulated divided light window. It's a marble all wood historic. The month and the swell match. It's 6/6. Everything else will match. They are proposing a simulated divided light with an insulated window to kind of add some sustainability and some construction resiliency.
so we can have access to the roof for the repair.
Thank you. Do my fellow board members have any questions for the applicant?
The existing windows are from,
Battery windows from the 1990s, brand I couldn't even recognize.
but they are single pane windows.
No, the windows there now are also uninsulated.
They're in their IGs. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you. I don't think we have any public comment. Oh, we do have two submissions, one from Preservation Society. All right, Preservation Society. Dear board members, per the Secretary of Interior standards, replacement should only be pursued for historic material that truly cannot be repaired. Further, windows on historic buildings should be authentic wood, true divided lights. This proposal should be denied as submitted for the applicant to explore repair of the existing windows or return with a more compatible window replacement option. Thank you for considering our position on this matter. We also had a position statement from the Historic Charleston Foundation. HCF has reviewed the application to replace the existing dormer windows on 95 Ashley Avenue with simulated divided light windows. According to the Secretary of Interior standards, historic materials which cannot be repaired should be replaced with new materials that match the original. We understand that the existing windows in this application are not historic. However, because they are true divided light windows, they conform to the Secretary of Interior standards and preservation best practices for maintaining authenticity. Simulated divided light windows are inappropriate on historic houses within the historic district. If the windows require replacement, they should be replaced with wood TDL windows as required in historic houses within the Bolton Historic District. We respectfully recommend denial of this application. And that is all comment we have. Frankie, if you'll give us any staff comments and recommendations, please.
Here, we just had a comment that simulated divided lights are inappropriate for location and for the age of the structure, for this age of the structure. And we were recommending denial. And I will add, mostly that is because we couldn't find approval for the existing light windows. So we were assuming that they have been replaced without the ER.
Oh, sorry. I'll ask a question.
Sure. You can ask questions anytime.
Okay. So we have records then going back to whenever they might have been in the 80s. Okay. I'm just curious. Okay.
Mr. Pio, did you want to respond to anything raised in the public comment or the city staff comments and recommendations?
So you comment on that, and this is your city, and you get, I'm the chairman of the Newport Historic District, which is just unusual. You would approve this window, but not because, only because we're trying to follow National Park Service, Secretary of Interior, and there are movement towards sustainability and resiliency, so we would look at this as a favorable move, considering the window's not original in the first place. So that's my only statement, but we do have an option, and I'll come back to Frank with a single pane true divided light, is our preference. All right.
Sorry, one more question. The ones that you've selected, are they impact rated too?
I'm sorry?
The windows you selected, are they impact rated or just insulated?
They're just insulated, but I'm gonna have make sure I have a tempered glass, or clear glass, but tempered, not just hurricane resistant, but tempered glass.
They'd be DP rated,
Oh, yeah.
not impact rated.
You can see from the jam liners, they're relatively new. Yes.
Thank you.
I think replacing them is totally appropriate, but
The applicant's presentation is now closed. We'll move into board discussion and a vote.
sorry, I was commenting there. I was just saying they're obviously newer size. You can see from the photographs, you can see the jam liners. And I believe using the right kind of window and replacements should be really the TDL single glaze that it's going to be an upgrade. what those windows are on their thing. So I would make a motion. I don't know.
Wait, I will make a comment first.
Oh, yeah. I thought you were ready to go.
Cause are you gonna make a motion to deny them? Because you.
She's okay with that,
SDLs?
unless I misheard.
No, I am not okay with this. Yeah, I'm gonna make a motion that, well, I'm not gonna make a motion now. That to definitely that the windows can be replaced, but they should be replaced with TDO, single place. That's all.
I'm gonna disagree just because I feel like this is an opportunity where the only people that are gonna see those windows are either the homeowners or people flying drones. I think that's an opportunity to.
You think because they were replaced,
And
they're
they're
not
not original, they're not really visible, honestly.
I get where you're coming from,
And
but
it's an opportunity to make them.
the framework of our policy statement regarding replacement, based on the Secretary of Interior standards, is strong, and it's been a precedent we hung on to pretty much adamantly. The idea that somebody came in and replaced these windows without a traceable approval is, to me, a correction now that could be made. There are a lot of people, windows are a big discussion right now. There are a lot of windows for some reason in certain areas that seem to have been replaced without any approvals.
Applicants point to them and say they did it there.
And then they point to those windows and say, well, they got it, why can't I have it? And the idea is that, well, they didn't get approval for it. And I appreciate people who come in and do it the right way, ask and do everything. And I appreciate from your role at Newport. And it seems like those people are being penalized over time. Those that they're using to replace the historic sashes with are not lasting. They're failing. We're going to be seeing a lot of them. I won't. Whoever comes along after me will. They're going to see a lot of these at some point in the future. So,
and Bill's point, it'd be very difficult from the street to tell that these were SDLs. And I understand that, but to Bill's point, we consistently follow the standard that you can't put SDLs in historic structures in certain locations. And this is one of those. And certain locations geographically, it's not a whole house. It's because it's in the dormers and it's a long way up in the air. If we start, I think, sort of going down that, we're getting into a bit of a slippery slope. So I'm inclined to stick to the letter of the law. I certainly appreciate people wanting to make their houses more efficient. But there are, first of all, probably replacing those three windows with SDLs. There's a difference in a house with no insulation. And there are other ways to treat windows, and particularly historic windows, to make them more efficient without changing them to modern SDL, even wood SDL window. You know, to kind of stick to the letter of our guidelines.
I agree.
Policy say anything relative to different categories of house, or it's just across the board? Just because I haven't memorized.
Well,
it.
if it were a house built in
Okay.
1980, when SDL windows were put in houses of that, we would say, yeah, you can replace it. It's just, when this house was built, there was no such thing as an SDL window.
Right.
I do think that, if we start saying, well, it's okay on this place on the house, but not on this place on the house, it's a slippery slope, and it's going to come back to bite us.
I think you have to go on what windows were available.
That's really good. I think the standard is getting that.
I appreciate appreciate what the applicant said and his other role facing the issues of this now. And give some advice maybe that might have to tap you for what you've encountered up there. At some point in time, we'd like to, see how the wheels are turning in other places. But now, as the guidelines say and things that we've stuck to, I would say that we would stick to TDL single place. So.
What if that wants to be revisited later with the policy statement,
Yeah, I think it's a bigger discussion and then eventually something.
But we need to follow the
I
statement
think
for
we need
now.
to have consistency.
Yeah, it's just where we are right now.
Yeah.
Anyway, I guess in a motion of denial, it's because of the proposal of that type of window.
It was not a denial of replacing the windows, it was
Okay.
denial of SDR.
Good, because I'm 100% those windows need to be.
And
Did they do that at staff?
they're gonna
level?
Yeah.
approve window staff.
To-
Yeah, they can
to
approve
treat
it.
budget,
Yeah.
So you would not approve that?
Yeah. Okay. So again,
Denial of the STL windows.
So technically, we denied simulated divided by at staff level, which is why it came to the board.
okay.
So if they would have true divided by, we would approve that, and they would.
We did approve that.
So all we have to do is deny it, and then they can come back to you with TDLs. That's it. That's the end of it. Okay. I'll make a motion for that.
So we have a motion on the floor for denial, do I have a second? Motion to a vote, Laura?
I am in favor. Yeah, in favor.
Bill Turner?
Yeah, in favor.
Bill Huey?
Yeah.
Bill Moore?
Yeah, in favor.
Chair votes the majority, and the motion passes unanimously.
Thank you, Mr. York.
Thank you.
Do I have a motion? Oh, well, agenda item number 15 to Prelo Street was withdrawn by staff. That brings us to the end of our agenda. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Bill Moore, Bill, second, all in favor, say aye.